This was Hopewell Baptist Church.
Is this the well?
Look up here.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
This is the view.
wow.
So this was
Makes
a
me
very
anxious looking
unique
up.
architectural marvel. And yeah, it was one of those things that, was just different than anything that had been made. They called it the teepee.
Yeah.
And even now people drive by, right, and they see this, they probably remember
Oh,
it.
there's no way you're going to forget a church that looks
Yeah.
like a teepee.
Yeah, just seeing it from the outside and now from the inside. They've got a big light that shoots out from inside. So you probably see it from the outside.
Just as a word of confession, whenever you told me the name that we were going to come here, I looked it up on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that this thing was completed in 1951
Yeah.
and cost approximately $20,000. And the architect is a super eclectic guy that's known for building crazy things or designing crazy things, and all throughout the state of Oklahoma, and said that his commission on this project was only $1,200. That he gave them a deep, deep discount because it was church and it was unique. And now that I'm actually here, it's kind of spacey, honestly.
Yeah,
It's really,
huge.
really cool.
Well, it's amazing. And again, it's probably something that draws attention from people, but
You really don't expect, like, you see the outside, and you come inside, you don't expect it to be
that's what I'm saying.
this, like, flamboyant or large or whatever.
But outside, you definitely can tell why they call it the teepee
Oh,
church.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
But you can see, I mean, you know, it's like the other churches we're seeing. It's fallen apart. It's abandoned. They've tried to do some renovations, and they're gonna try when they get the money to renovate it. It can be a church building again.
Yeah.
But right now, it's a memory. You know, it from the outside looks like it could be this cool thing, but inside it's got some problems. Right?
Yeah,
Need to be fixed.
Yeah, you know that good life-changing things happened in here, but somewhere along the way, it kind of became a a pit stop on Wikipedia. It's just a thing to look up and to reminisce about what it used to be.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Just a memory, and that's, you know, we're kind of looking for the symbolism and all these things, but that's not what we want our faith to be. We don't want it to be something that in its heyday was great, a great memory, you know, or something that on the outside looked so cool, but something that God can use now, something that's happening full of life now. And so, I don't know, maybe this place can be that again.
Yeah.
We all love a good amnesia story, don't we? Hollywood makes these movies where the main character wakes up somewhere, they don't know who they are, they don't know how they got there, and we have to piece it together. Or maybe the group of guys who were out on some wild night and they wake up the next morning not remembering anything. Don't say the name of the movie, I'm praying for you. But we like these kinds of movies where there's just this loss of memory and we've got to figure out the puzzle to solve what really happened. But the reality is that's kind of a terrifying prospect in real life, isn't it? If you forget everything, or if you forget something really, really important. Any guys out there forget something important like an anniversary or a birthday, right? It's not good. Or maybe you remember that sinking feeling in school when you would show up and you thought, oh, the test was today, I forgot. Those are not fun moments. It's not fun to forget something important. And yet, that is the recurring theme for Israel throughout Scripture. They get close to God, but then it seems they forget. We've been talking the past 2 weeks and outlining this descent, this spiral downward of Israel as they slowly became more and more distant from God. But it's really all summed up in this one verse in Judges chapter 2, verse 10. It says, "And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel." Basically, one generation later, there was no one left to remember God or the things he had done or the things he had said. The people had forgotten. It's a sad reality, right? Maybe you look around today, you look at the news, you watch through your Facebook feed, you overhear conversations, and you just see the state of the world, and you think the people have forgotten. Or if you're being honest and you're evaluating yourself, and you think of the ways you can be, the ways you can live, you think, maybe I have forgotten. And it gets darker. The passage goes on and it says, and the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and they served the Baals, and they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They'd forgotten all of that. And it says they went after other gods from among the gods of the people who were around them, and they bowed down to them. You see, they forgot God, they forgot who He was, and there was this vacuum, right? And they immediately replace it with something artificial, with something that's not real. You see, we take the truth, we take who God is, and when we forget, we replace it with something. Now, a lot of times, that something is something that we actually worship, because we were made to worship, whether you realize it or not. And if we aren't worshiping God, we're going to worship something. Whether that something is yourself, whether that something is the almighty dollar, or another person, right? The pretty girl, a handsome guy, or the perfect job. And so quickly we find ourselves trading the real for something less that we want to worship. And here's the sad irony, is God warned them about this exact scenario. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18, he says this. It's really a commandment. He says, you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you power to get wealth, that He may confirm His covenant that He swore to your fathers, as it is this day. And if you forget the Lord your God, if you forget Him, and go after other gods, and serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. You see, God reminds them who He is. He says, I'm the provider. I'm the one. I am the help in your time of trouble. And if you forget me, He says, not only will you end up serving, worshiping these false gods, but He attaches a warning in there. He says, you will surely perish. This idea of being utterly destroyed, that this path leads to destruction. This is God pleading with His people, with Israel, with us. Remember me. Remember me. He is the one who is our help, our provider. But they don't. They don't remember. They go after these other gods. You see, here's the question. Maybe we should word it this way. It's who we are worshiping, but even more than that, maybe this is easier for you to wrap your head around. Who are you putting your faith in? What are you putting your trust in? If not God, then what? What are you trusting instead? There's a psalm, Psalm 20, verse 7, and it says this, some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. Stop trusting in man-made things, right? Maybe it's not chariots now. Maybe it's not even horses, but maybe it's your best laid plans. Or maybe it's your own understanding, your gift of strategy. These aren't necessarily bad things, but when we trust in them over God, they become idols. They become sources of worship, sources of our faith that we're putting in rather than God. I love Psalm 77. It says, I will remember the works of the Lord. Surely I will remember your wonders of old. Psalm 105, remember His marvelous works which He has done, His wonders and the judgments of His mouth. Over and over again, through Psalms, throughout all of the Bible, we see this idea, remember, remember, remember. God is telling us, remember. Remember who I am. Remember what I say. Remember what I've done. So how do we do that? How do we remember? Because Israel, his chosen nation, still seemed to struggle with this. The people that saw a flaming pillar come and lead them out of slavery, and yet they so quickly forget. So how can we remember? Well, there's some very, very practical and yet spiritual things that I think we can learn, that we can put into practice to help us remember, to help you and your CGs remember. The first thing, and it's super obvious, but the idea of repetition. Repetition, 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 right? How do you remember something? If you were studying for a test in school, right, you would just keep studying those answers over and over again, studying the book over and over again. The repetition helped you remember. And the people of Israel, when they were doing it right, they got this concept. They would meditate and recite scriptures over and over again. They would memorize those things, hide them in their heart, you would say. They would even go so far as to take scriptures and scrolls and roll them up and tie them around their foreheads. The idea was to keep it so present on their minds 24/7 that over and over again, being confronted with the truth, that they would remember it. So what are you repeating? What are the routines in your life to hide this stuff in your heart? Or we don't like this word, but I'm going to throw it out there. They would be ritualistic in how they would observe different things to help them remember. Now you may say, oh, it sounds like a religious, structured word I don't like. But Jesus calls us to do this exact thing when he tells us, do this in remembrance of me. The Lord's Supper, right? It's an act of worship that we do and we repeat. And it helps us to remember who Christ is and what he did for us. We take that bread, we take that wine or juice, and it's a reminder of the blood that he shed and the new covenant he made for us. We do these things. Why? To remember. What else? Another thing that they did that would help them remember. They had songs and stories, right? We see scriptures that literally entire passages of the Bible are just songs they would sing to remind them how God saved them from Israel, how God did this amazing, miraculous thing. And they would sing them, right? You ever have a really great worship song stuck in your head and it's just kind of on loop in your brain for the rest of the day? That's a wonderful thing, right? Way better than a TV commercial jingle or something stuck in your head. To have uplifting words of life that you're repeating throughout the day. Listen to this stuff. Listen to songs that remind you of who God is. Put more of these things in your life to sing his praises, to sing his worship, and to remind you the stories of what he's done. And lastly, and again, this stuff is just very, very practical. How are you reading and writing things that are going to help you remember him? Obviously, Scripture, open it up as often as you can. Read his word, read the Bible, but don't just stop there. Write down what he's doing in your life, right? We have the gospel according to Mark, the gospel according to John. It's because these guys sat down and wrote down what God was doing, what Christ was doing in their life. Now, I'm not suggesting you go write your own Bible, but I'm saying journal. Sit down and journal what God is doing in your life, the prayers that he's answering, the way that the gospel has changed your life, the way that the good news has impacted you. Write that stuff down, because there will inevitably be a day that you start to forget. You start to feel distant from him, and you can go back to those pages and read it and remember and say, oh, I felt so much closer to him there. So these are some practical things. These are ways that you can remember, but here's the bottom line. Remembering is something that you have to remember to do. It's a proactive principle, a proactive choice that you make to say, I'm not going to forget. I'm not going to forget who God is. And again, this whole series is about this. No matter how long you feel like you've forgotten God, no matter how long that seems like a distant memory, it's not too late. It's not too late to come back. It's not too late to jump into Scripture, jump into your journals, to jump into those moments and say, God, I want to remember.